Hello, I am Hranush Dermoyan, Assistant Editor at EVN Report.
And I'm Catherine Odom, an intern at EVN Report, and we will present the Week in Review.
Every week, EVN Report brings you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, Gyumri Mayor Vardan Ghukasyan detained on corruption charges. Armenian and Azerbaijani civil society representatives meet in Yerevan. Baku lifts ban on cargo transit to Armenia through its territory, and mandatory military service will be reduced from 2 to 1.5 years. These stories and more on our weekly roundup of the news. Gyumri's long controversial mayor Vardan Ghukasyan is once again making headlines, this time behind bars. Armenia's anti-corruption committee has detained Ghukasyan for 2 months on corruption charges, suspending him from office. Investigators say the mayor and the city's chief architect allegedly demanded a $4 million bribe, around $10,000, to legalize an illegally constructed building that was said to be demolished. Investigators released audio recordings that allegedly captured the two discussing the details of the payoff and how to cover it up. Authorities claim the mayor's dealings go far beyond one case, that he was at the center of a wider corruption network involving blackmail, falsified documents, and the manipulation of city property transfers for personal gain. 7 others have been arrested, including the chief architect. 2 are now in pre-trial detention while the investigation into the rest continues. Ghukasyan has rejected the charges. His defense team insists the case is politically motivated, pointing to his opposition ties and alleging that the investigation is part of a broader campaign to silence critics. Ghukasyan's previous tenure as Gyumri mayor from 1999 to 2012 was shadowed by persistent allegations of corruption and abuse of power. He was accused of leading a powerful clan that dominated much of the city's economy, stifling competition and consolidating control over key sectors. Despite this, he was re-elected in March. Currently, he is also under investigation for the illegal appropriation of property, with a case launched in 2024. Earlier charges in 2022 accused him of embezzlement and illegal allocation of city property. His son Spartak Ghukasyan was placed under house arrest in early September on charges of extortion of coercion. Spartak Ghukasyan's legal troubles are not new. In 2007, he was involved in a daylight shootout that wounded 2 people and later served 18 months in prison. He has also been linked to shootings in 2009 and 2012. As law enforcement moved to arrest Ghukasyan at Gyumri City Hall, his supporters gathered outside. 29 people now face criminal charges over the unrest, accused of blocking entrances, damaging property, attacking police, and obstructing an anti-corruption investigation.
Another opposition mayor has been sentenced to prison. This week, the Criminal Court of Yerevan handed down a 6-year and 3-month sentence to David Hambartsumyan, the head of Masis and the opposition's unified candidate for prime minister. The case dates back to 2018, when Hambartsumyan allegedly attacked protesters not far from Yerevan. He was charged with armed hooliganism under the old criminal code and had been out on bail since then. According to his lawyer, the testimonies were contradictory and later withdrawn. None of the witnesses who appeared in court testified against Hambartsumyan, yet the judge still issued a guilty verdict. His lawyer also noted that under a 2018 amnesty law, Hambartsumyan would have been exempt from punishment if sentenced to 6 years or less. Instead, the judge imposed a sentence just above that threshold. Hambartsumyan, currently abroad on an official visit, called his sentence over a 7.5-year-old case fabricated and politically motivated, noting that all other participants were cleared while he was singled out as the organizer. He said his nomination for prime minister by the opposition triggered the government's efforts to neutralize him and urged opposition forces and patriotic citizens to unite around a no-confidence vote against Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Hambartsumyan confirmed he will return to Armenia on October 28th and continue fighting for his freedom and the release of political prisoners. The verdict has not yet entered into force. Hambartsumyan plans to appeal his sentence. In a statement, the Republican Party called the verdict a record of judicial subservience and part of a broader campaign of political repression. The party accused the government of deepening authoritarianism, persecuting opposition figures, and using the courts as a political tool, vowing to continue its struggle by all constitutional means. Hambartsumyan was elected head of Masis in 2021, defeating the ruling Civil Contract Party with 50.6% of the vote to their 45.6%.
Azerbaijan has lifted its long-standing ban on cargo transit to Armenia. President Ilham Aliyev made the announcement in Kazakhstan, saying the move shows that peace between the two countries is becoming a reality, not just a document. The first shipment to make the journey is Kazakh wheat headed to Armenia. The wheat will travel from Aktau port to Baku by ship and then continue by rail through Azerbaijan and Georgia before reaching Armenia. Prime Minister Pashinyan called the decision an important step, step in implementing the Washington Declaration, which envisions not only an unimpeded connection between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan, but also advantages of international and domestic communication for Armenia. His spokesperson Nazeli Baghdasaryan added that this move helps build mutual trust and institutionalize peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's also the first time Armenia is importing wheat from Kazakhstan, a notable shift since nearly all of its wheat imports traditionally come from Russia. This development marks an important step towards reducing that dependence. In Kazakhstan, Aliyev also highlighted the broader benefits of opening regional communications in the South Caucasus, including growth in the transport and logistics sector. He again used the term Zangezur corridor, saying it offers enormous potential. He noted that Azerbaijan plans to complete all road and rail connections by mid-next year and expressed hope that Armenia will accelerate its work so the corridor could open by the end of 2028. Aliyev also stressed that with President Trump's backing, the project is likely to be implemented, creating another route along the middle corridor.
In a notable development this week, a group of Azerbaijani experts flew directly to Yerevan to take part in a roundtable with Armenian civil society representatives, a first-of-its-kind meeting organized by the Armenian Security Policy Research Center as a part of a joint initiative supported by official structures from both sides. The discussions are part of efforts to implement the Armenian-Azerbaijani agreements reached in Washington on August 8, 2025. Participants focused on the peace agenda, economic cooperation, humanitarian issues, and ways to build mutual trust, including establishing long-term connections between civil societies. On October 22nd, Armenian National Security Council Secretary Armen Grigoryan met with the participants, praising such meetings for fostering dialogue and emphasizing that broad societal involvement strengthens peace. Civil society representatives thanked the Armenian side for organizing the event and stressed the importance of continuing these initiatives. According to Armenia's fact investigation platform, the delegation included Dilara Efendieva, one of the self-described eco-activists involved in the December 2022 blockade of the Lachin corridor. That blockade cut off Artsakh from Armenia, preventing the passage of humanitarian aid and medical evacuations, despite Efendieva's public assurances that ambulances would be allowed through, claims later proven false.
In the meantime, Parliament Speaker Alen Simonian met his Azerbaijani counterpart Sahiba Gafarova in Geneva on the sidelines of the 151st Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union. The two welcomed the agreements reached in Washington and the ongoing steps towards normalizing relations. They also stressed the importance of continuing constructive dialogue and expressed their readiness to support initiatives aimed at building trust at the parliamentary level.
More on regional connectivity. Armenian Special Envoy for Talks with Turkey, Rubin Rubinyan, announced this week that an interagency meeting with Turkish counterparts will soon take place to discuss the restoration and reopening of the Gyumri Kars Railway. He said more details will be shared after the meeting, though no date was disclosed. Last month, Rubinyan met his Turkish counterpart, Serdar Kilic, in Yerevan. They agreed that both countries will carry out the necessary technical studies for restoring the railway and the power transmission line. However, previous agreements, including opening the border for third country citizens and diplomatic passport holders, have not yet been implemented.
And this week, Prime Minister Pashinyan was at the Vatican to attend the canonization of Archbishop Ignatius Maloyan and 6 other blesseds. The ceremony took place in St. Peter's Square and was presided over by Pope Leo XIV. Ignatius Maloyan served as Armenian Catholic Archbishop of Mardin from 1911 to 1915. During the Armenian genocide, he was executed by Ottoman authorities for refusing to convert to Islam and is recognized as a martyr by the Catholic Church. While at the Vatican, Pashinyan also met with the Pope. They discussed regional issues, Armenia-Azerbaijan relations, and humanitarian concerns.
Later in the week, Pashinyan traveled to Tbilisi to attend the Silk Road Forum, where he delivered a speech. On the sideline of the forum, he met his Georgian counterpart, Irakli Kobakidze. In Georgia, the Prime Minister reiterated that Armenia is ready to ensure the transit of trucks from Turkey to Azerbaijan via Armenian territory, starting from today. He stated that he's convinced that rail and highway routes connecting Azerbaijan with Nakhichevan and Turkey will be repaired and/or reconstructed within 2 to 3 years. Meanwhile, Georgia's Defense Minister, Irakli Chikovani, visited Yerevan for a meeting with his Armenian counterpart, Suren Papekyan. Armenia's Defense Ministry said they highly appreciated the current course of Armenia-Georgia defense cooperation and discussed army reforms and reached unspecified agreements. Chikovani also held a meeting with Prime Minister Pashinyan.
And regarding army reforms, starting January 1, mandatory military service in Armenia will be reduced from 2 to 1.5 years, Prime Minister Pashinyan announced this week. The change, initially planned for mid-2026, will now take effect with the winter conscription. Defense Minister Papekyan defended the move in the National Assembly, saying the reduction should not be seen as downsizing the army. He noted that the growth in contract soldiers balances part of the reduction, and many conscripts conscripts are now choosing to continue long-term service under the Defender of the Homeland program. While the reduction means fewer conscripts, he insisted the army's structure and defense capabilities remain intact, dismissing concerns that the move weakens national security. Meanwhile, opposition members argue that cutting conscription by 6 months means a 25% reduction in draftees, and the increase in contract soldiers does not fully make up for the gap. They point out that the army already faces serious recruitment challenges, and under these circumstances, the reduction could weaken the armed forces and have serious consequences for national defense.
This week, Archbishop Natan Hovhannisyan was questioned in connection with an audio recording circulated by government-affiliated media. In the leaked recording, a man identified as former deacon Aghan Yernjekyan accuses Catholicos Garagin II of forcing him and his mother to attend an anti-Pashinyan rally. The recording is reportedly from 2023, though it's unclear who made it or how it reached the media. The Mother See condemned the release, calling it a violation of privacy and part of a broader campaign by authorities against the church.
Meanwhile, the church has defrocked priest Stepan Asadarian, who recently told Armenian public TV that he was forced to take part in anti-government protests, remarks that led to the arrest of several clergymen last week, including the head of the Aragadzodan diocese. According to the Mother See, the decision was made because Father Asadarian had publicly discredited the church, ignored the primate's instructions, and stopped commemorating the Catholicos during liturgy, effectively placing himself outside of the church's communion. He had also refused to appear before the Commission on Awards and Disciplinary Matters, violating his vow of obedience. In response, Asadarian announced that he will still hold Sunday service at the Hovhannisyan Church and invited the faithful to attend. He said he had submitted a letter expressing willingness to meet with the Commission, but that the church published its decision immediately after receiving it. Prime Minister Pashinyan later said in a video message that he plans to attend the priest service. During a parliamentary Q&A session, he went further, calling the church leadership lowlifes, sex addicts, and KGB agents, saying they do not represent the Armenian church and that he intends to remove them at all cost.
The government is moving to shut down Shokakat TV, the official television channel of the Armenian Apostolic Church, known for its spiritual, cultural, and educational programming. This week, Parliament adopted in the first reading a bill that would exclude Shokakat from the list of publicly funded broadcasters. Opposition lawmakers voted against, arguing that the move carries clear political undertones. Under current law, state funds cover the operations of public television, the public news channel, and Shokakat TV. Lawmakers from the ruling Civil Contract Party, who authored the bill, claim that funding for all three is being used inefficiently, citing low viewership and poor quality. They argue that reallocating the funds could make public broadcasting more effective. The debate over Shokagat isn't new. It first flared up in Parliament last year when Vardan Ghukasyan was leading protests from Tavush to Yerevan calling for Prime Minister Pashinyan's resignation. At the time, Civil Contract MP Arsen Torosyan openly suggested transferring Shokagat's funding to public television.
Over the weekend, Russian-Armenian tycoon Savel Karapetyan's Mertsevov, or Our Way movement, held a rally in downtown Yerevan. According to the Union of Informed Citizens NGO, which uses drone footage to count participants, roughly 7,600 people attended. The crowd marched from Freedom Square to the National Security Service building, where Karapetyan has been held for 4 months, demanding his release. A heavy police presence surrounded the area. During the rally, organizers announced plans for a pilgrimage to Echmiadzin, saying it would show that the church is not alone. Karapetyan faces charges of inciting the seizure of power, tax evasion, and money laundering.
This week, truck drivers in Armenia blocked access to 3 border crossings into Georgia, Bavra, Bagratyshan, and Gogavan, for several hours, protesting a new regulation imposed by Russia. Under the new rule, citizens of countries with visa-free entry to Russia can now stay there only for 90 days within a year, instead of the previous 180. The drivers say this change will severely impact those involved in cargo and passenger transport, as long waits at the Upper Lars crossing already limit the time they can spend on the road. They're demanding that the Armenian government negotiate with Moscow to reverse the decision. Economy Minister Gevorg Papayan said the government is working on the issue, while the Interior Ministry confirmed it's under discussion with Russian counterparts and will be raised at the upcoming Eurasian Economic Commission meeting.
The pre-election campaign for the upcoming municipal elections in Vagar-Shapat or Echmiadzin kicked off earlier this week. The snap elections are set for November 16, with 8 political forces competing for control of the city. Among the contenders are former NSS chief Artur Vanetsyan's Hayrenik Party, the Haghtanak Alliance, which brings together Araj and ARF Dashnaktsutyun parties. Araj is affiliated with Alexander Kochubayev, who was recently detained on charges of defamation of lawyers and judges. Also participating are the ruling Civil Contract, the Free Democrats, Mother Armenia Armenia, which is affiliated with the parliamentary opposition Armenia Alliance, Ժառանգություն, Aram Sarkisyan's Հանրապետություն, and former Defense Minister Ashak Karapetyan's Pan-Armenian Front. The snap elections were called after former Mayor Diana Gasparyan resigned amid investigations into alleged abuse of power and corruption involving her husband and in-laws. Meanwhile, observers raised transparency concerns, saying party financing rules haven't been properly enforced, with reports on campaign funds still unpublished. The Union of Informed Citizens also flagged possible vote buying and misuse of public resources by the ruling Civil Contract Party. A recent charity event in Doghs village distributed gifts to residents, and municipal workers were reportedly involved in campaign activities during work hours. Complaints have been filed with the Prosecutor General and the Electoral Commission.
Ruben Vardan has announced that he is refusing legal representation in his ongoing trial in Azerbaijan, citing serious violations of both international law and Azerbaijani procedural rules. Through his family, he explained that the hearings have become a farce, and that all avenues for a fair defense have been blocked. He said that both his petitions and his lawyer's requests for a fair trial were ignored, and the court rejected witnesses who could clarify the facts. In this absurd process, he noted, the role of a defense attorney is reduced to a mere formality, and he refuses to participate in the proceedings. Vardan stressed that he does not want the illusion of defense, but the actual protection of his rights. The Baku military court has announced that since Vardan does not have an agreement with another lawyer, the state will appoint a public defender for him.
And now we will present the articles and podcasts we have published during the week. Breaking New Ground with Topographies of Descent, Armenian Art from the Dodge Collection by Christopher Atamian. In his latest installment for the ArtSpeak column, Christopher Atamian presents Topographies of Descent, a sweeping curatorial study of post-Soviet Armenian art exhibited at the Zimmerli Art Museum. It traces how artists navigated censorship, identity, and modernity, transforming dissent into a language of aesthetic and cultural renewal.
Also published this week, Unconventional Grief, Armenia's Landscapes Lost to Mining by Anahet Ghukasyan. In her first article for EVN Report, she examines solastalgia, the sense of homesickness felt by residents of Tekhut village. Copper molybdenum mine reshapes their native landscape, destroying forests, contaminating rivers, and disrupting traditional livelihoods like farming and animal husbandry.
And we have another article by Sosi Tatikyan, Armenia, China, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Navigating Between Poles. Tatikyan looks into Armenia's pursuit of a strategic partnership with China and its bid to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. She argues that these moves reflect a broader effort to recalibrate foreign policy amid shifting global alignments, balancing ambition with constraint in an increasingly multipolar world.
And by Hirnush Demiryan, Armenia, still off the beaten track? In her latest article, Hirnush outlines the remarkable growth Armenia's tourism industry has seen in recent years, underlining, however, that structural weaknesses, including limited funding, poor visibility, and lack of strategy, continue to hold it back. She argues that unlocking its full potential requires sustainable planning, decentralization, and serious government commitment.
And Tatevi Khairapetyan writes again about Armenia, Azerbaijan, Beyond Washington, Azerbaijan's performative peace. More than 2 months after the Washington Declaration, Tatev Khairapetyan examines the widening gap between Baku's diplomatic vows with on-the-ground reality, inflammatory rhetoric, sham trials, expansionist Western Azerbaijan narratives, and divergent trip talk signaling a performative peace narrative.
And from our podcast section, the Peace Act, targeting Azerbaijan's Achilles heel. In this episode of EVN Talks, Tim Jamal, president of Global Arm, discusses the recently introduced Peace Act, a U.S. congressional bill that he says puts a target on Aliyev's back, sanctioning Azerbaijan's leadership, military capacity, and financial institutions tied to its oil and gas sector in the event of renewed aggression against Armenia. Jamal also outlines Global Arm's strategic approach to political advocacy, one designed to counter Azerbaijan's powerful lobbying machine and strengthen coordinated global pro-Armenia and pro-Artsakh efforts.
And this is the kind of week we had in Armenia. Have a peaceful and safe weekend. And next week, Maria and Rubina will be back.